Hey, it's 2025 and this is the first video of the year. Today I'm thinking of exploring how to build a set plan based on an Adobe Illustrator template. With all the basic tools and intermediate tools of drafting and doing tech work on Vectorworks already sorted, it's nice to take a step into the creative side of things. Usually the designers that I work with tend to give me their set plan and set designs in the form of Adobe Illustrator. Then it tends to fall to me to draft it up in 3D into Vectorworks so that my lighting designer and multimedia and sound people can work from there. So what I usually do is I import it in as a PDF layer and I trace it out before pulling it out into 3D. So we're going to take a look at how I do that today, and maybe it'll give you an idea or two about how you can include that into your workflow as well. Okay, so jumping into Vectorworks, you'll notice immediately that I have some things that are different. Firstly, I'm using the 2025 edition of Vectorworks Design Suite now. So there's this little thingamabob in the corner, and this is what Vectorworks is calling the on-screen view control. It's very AutoCAD in the way that it works. So basically, if I want to go over to my front left isometric view, I click on this little corner and it jumps into that perspective. If I want to look at it from the right isometric, I click on this one. And if I want to look at it from the top, you just click on the top. There's even a little top 3D and top button there so that you are clear which particular perspective you're taking on. AutoCAD users will feel right at home with this. If you're new to it though, it's a helpful little interface and kind of saves you the time of having to go up into your perspectives up here to change what you're looking at. So I'm going to just get started on a brand new drawing. This is a blank drawing. All I've done is I've labeled it, I've saved the drawing. There are no classes and no layers that I created. The default design layer 1 is there, and by default in classes I have dimensions and none. So to import in my PDF, I'm going to go over to File, Import, and I'm going to import in PDF. I will select my file and hit Open. You'll get this little pop-up which asks you how many of your pages you want to bring in. For me, my PDF only has one page, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. What you want to make sure you do while you're here is ensure that you've selected Snap Geometry, because this will make it easier when you're tracing, especially when there are sharp corners and odd measurements inside your drawing. I'm going to hit Import, and Vectorworks will bring in the drawing for me. If you look at this plan, you can see that there are a bunch of blocks around the space, and essentially what this is a show where we had musicians placed on these island-like structures, and we mapped projectors to create some kind of texture and content on the islands. So it's a digital music show, if you will. Since I have my PDF in the drawing now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that it's on the correct layer and it's on its own class. So I want to select my PDF and I want to put this in a new class. I'll call this 00 reference. And we want to make sure that it's in design layer 1, and I'm going to call design layer 1 PDF. Okay, this PDF might not have come in a accurate scale, so I want to make sure that it's in the correct scale before I start tracing. How I do this is I first identify an object in the drawing for which I know the exact dimensions of. In this case, it's this rectangular block over here. This is a NemoFlex riser, and I know that its dimensions are 2000 millimeters by 1000 millimeters. So with my PDF selected, I'll go over to Modify, Scale Objects, and in here, I'll make sure that I scale Symmetric by Distance, and I will click on this little icon next to the current distance. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to pick on the bottom leftmost point of this riser, followed by the bottom rightmost point of this riser. Vectorworks will tell me that this has a distance of 1000 millimeters. I know that I need it to be 2000 millimeters, and with that sorted out, I'll hit OK, and the PDF should jump up once in size. So now I have a drawing that is in a 1:1 sizing. To make sure that I have this right, I'm going to click on the tape measure tool over here, and I'm going to click from here to here and make sure that I have that 2000 mm measurement. Next, I'm going to head over to my design layers, and I'll add a new design layer over here. I'm going to call this my set base. So in most cases when you're drawing, you might have your settings over here for your layer options in gray snap others, or gray others, or show others. And in some of these options, what you'll notice is you don't see the PDF when you are in a set base layer, and that's because Vectorworks doesn't have transparency for PDFs. So if you're trying to show snap others, that's probably the only situation in which you can see the PDF behind your tracing layer. What I usually like to do here is I'll go into the PDF layer and edit its settings, and I'll set my opacity over here to 50%, while also making sure that my scale is 1:50. I hit OK, and I will go into my set base layer, and I'll make sure that over here my opacity is 100% and my scale is also 1:50. So now with a little bit of a translucent-ish kind of feel, you can see through your tracing layer and see what you are tracing. And I can now move forward with tracing this out using the basic drawing tools that we learned way back. Knowing that I'm going to be drawing new elements into this drawing, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm in the set base design layer, and I'm going to go over to classes, and I'm going to add a couple of new classes over here. I'm going to add a 01 blocks. I'm also going to add a 01 cubes. I'm going to add a 01 risers and 01 polys. Okay, what this will help me do is help me group the different elements of my island, so that when I try to modify them later on or turn them on or off separately, it just becomes that much easier for me. Now I need to look at the drawing itself and decide on some constants. So seeing these blocks over here, knowing that this is 1 meter, I can decide that this is 750 mm, this is 500 mm, and that will make the shorter arm of this rectangular block 250 mm. So using that as my default dimension templates, everything I draw will be in multiples of 250 mm. So I'm going to go right ahead and make sure that I am in my set base layer, and I'm going to drop in a rectangle. For this rectangle, I'm going to make sure that it is at a width of 250 mm and a height of 750 mm. So with that, this will kind of match up to what I have over here. So from here, I will just duplicate this using option drag, and I will start modifying the dimensions to match the sizes that I need. I also need a 500 by 500, and this is a 1000 by 250, and there we go. So I'll just drop these into their positions and duplicate them across, and you'll notice that Vectorworks is snapping to the PDF layer that's at the back. If this is annoying you, then perhaps to switch over to just show others might be the best option. so that it will continue to snap to the foremost layer. Okay. This one is a 750. Here. Okay, I suppose it's kind of nice of my set designer to give me a design that is primarily based on similar shapes, but if you are someone who gets exposed to many different set designers, the likelihood is that you will see many different kinds of blocks used to create their designs, and it may never be as simple as just rectangles and squares. So there's probably one method to deal with each one of these things, and you just have to figure it out as you go along. This one is a 500 by 250. And there we go. That's pretty much all the blocks that my designer wanted on this island. Okay, with the rectangles laid out, I want to make sure that they are in their correct classes. So my 4 cubes over here are going to go over to my cubes class. My lines over here. My blocks over here are going to go into their own blocks class. Okay, so now we're going to add in the risers into our island. I want to first make sure that I'm in my top plan view. I'm going to head over to my event design tool palette and look for my stage tag tool. I'll just drop in a stage tag over here, and I want to change its dimensions to make sure that it's at a depth of 1000 mm, 2000 mm width, and 400 mm of height. Then I want to drag this over into my space over here. And we're just going to duplicate one more for this second riser. And you can see that the island is starting to take shape. So when my set designer came up with this concept, what he wanted was the island to have curved edges instead of squared off edges, because it gives us a little bit less of a headache when we're mapping the video projection. It also makes the island look less industrial and more natural. So he wanted to have a polyline kind of concept around the edges. We're going to get into that, but before that, let me just shift these two risers into their own class, and we can start to trace out the polyline. So there's two ways to do this. You can either draw your curved lines separately from your straight lines and then compose them together, or you can change the tool mode and draw it as one big polyline object altogether. I'm going to go with one method for each side of the island, just to show you what's exactly going on. So with the polyline tool selected, I'm going to make sure that I'm in the Bezier vertex mode, and I'm going to start from over here. I'm just going to go out over here, and I'm just going to have a bit of a natural curve with my line. Somewhere around here. And the trick is, before I select my last point of the curve, I need to switch back to the corner vertex mode, and I'm going to select over here, and then I come down with a straight line, and I continue my line following the edge of the blocks. And when I click on my last point over here, it should give me a complete polyline. Okay, this method of creating your curved edges might be confusing for some, because if you don't switch the tool modes at the right time, you start to get curved edges instead of straight edges. So if you prefer to do it separately, you can. Essentially all you need to do is finish a polyline first and then do a series of lines. So I'm going to select my polyline tool here, and with the Bezier vertex mode selected, I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to do the same thing. But this time, instead of switching tools, I'm just going to double click over here to end, and you get a polyline with a bit of a fill. I'm going to switch back to the selection tool, and I'm going to turn off the fill of this polyline so you can see the edge. Now using my regular line tool, I'm just going to trace out the inside, one line at a time. So while this might not be the most efficient use of your time, there are those that revel in doing things with repeated actions because it just makes things easier for them. So not my place to tell you which way works for you. So as long as you get there at the end, all's good. Okay, and now I have two sets of lines, and what I want to do is I want to turn off my cubes, turn off my blocks, and I want to turn off my risers, and you can see the line that I've created over here. So I'm going to select everything that is here, and we want to make sure that it is in fact a complete line. There's no component of the curved edges and straight edges that's missing, and head over to modify and compose. That should give you one solid polyline. If you go in and add a solid fill, it should look pretty much the same as the other one on the other side. So we can move into extruding these things out to complete our island, but before that I just want to make sure that these two objects are in the polys class, and then I want to turn on the rest of my objects, and we can go into giving this a bit of height. Okay, my designer had given me notes, if you can see in this PDF over here, about how high he wanted each block to be, and I can't see that when I'm doing this. So what I want to do over here is first, under my classes, I want to show snap modify others, so I can work with all of these blocks without having to change my class. And then I'm going to select everything that's here, and I'm going to change their fill to none, just so that I can see through. I already know that my risers are the correct height because I created them with the correct height. So we're going to turn the risers off, and then we can focus on the rest of these blocks and cubes. So looking at this in an isometric view, we can head over to the modeling tool palette, look for the push and pull tool, and with it selected, I'm just going to select one section at a time and enter in the extrusion that my designer wanted. Okay, and with that done, I can move on to the curved edges. So for the curved edges, it was meant to be slightly lower than the lowest block outside. So 200 would be ideal. And then we felt that maybe to have a bit of a taper to it might work better. So we just did 200 first, and then we wanted to round off the edges, so we went ahead to use the taper or a fillet edge, and we just wanted to fillet this edge. We did a pretty curved edge, so maybe 25 degrees. Okay, just to give it a bit of a curved edge. So we can see now that the island is pretty much taken shape. So I'm going to head back over to my top plan view. I'm going to select all of this, and I'm going to fill it back with a solid fill. And with that out of the way, turn the risers back on. And looking at this in an isometric view, you can see that the island has taken shape rather well. What I can do from here is I can turn off my PDF layer because I don't need it anymore, and this is pretty much what my island is looking like at the moment. Okay, if you're wondering why we didn't build up higher on this edge, it's because we needed the musicians to be visible to the audience. So while symmetry and wanting it to look like a island structure is important, we also wanted the artist to be visible. And up next we have textures. Okay, and there's two ways to do this. We can either assign textures based on the classes that we have, or we can assign based on the blocks that we have selected. With this block selected over here, I'm going to go over to my object info palette and click on render, and in here you have a texture setting, and you can see that it's set as by class. So I'm going to click on this, and in here I'm going to look for concrete. You might not be able to see this pop up very well. Let me see. Okay, concrete, and I'm just going to select that, and you will see that the object changes texture to concrete. This will work, but having to go around on a block by block basis to do this might take you forever. So how I prefer to do it is, because I already have these classes set up over here, I'm going to click on blocks, edit, and in the edit classes pop-up over here, I'm going to go over to textures and check user creation and check textures, and I'm going to pick a texture from here. So we'll just do something different for this. Maybe something like that, and press select, and it will take a moment to download, and then you hit OK, and everything should render out in that same way. One little difference between these two modes is that if you try to assign a texture individually, you have the option of scaling up the texture or scaling down the texture, and this gives you a different kind of a finish, because what Vectorworks is doing is it's modifying the texture data to suit the look that you want. You can also rotate it, so you can have the option of a slightly unique texture on each block. Not as easy to implement when you're trying to apply it on class basis. So I will go back into this guy, and I want to change this back to by class, and that should set it back to follow the same texture as the rest of its friends. So since I have a way of changing my textures on a class basis, I'm going to do the same thing for the cubes and the polys, and it's the same idea. Just click on the class, edit, and I'm going to go to textures and assign a texture, maybe something different, something darker for this. For the polys as well, I'm going to edit their class, go to textures, use add creation, and assign a different texture. If you're working closely with the designer, then you could probably sort out something which the designer visualizes. Then you can get it closer to what they see in their mind, and that should pretty much sort you out for your textures. So the only thing that I have left here is that I want to present this island in a sheet layer, and I want it to be visible to my designer with dimensions and all the information that they feel is necessary. So what I want to do is I want to go to my sheet layers, and I want to create a new sheet. I am going to call this sheet sheet number 1, and this is going to be set plan schematic, and hit OK. This is my sheet. I want to make sure that this sheet is the correct size. So under page setup, I want to make sure that this is an ISO A2 and in landscape. And OK, and my sheet will appear with the correct sizing. I want to go over to my tools over here and click on the title block border tool and insert a title block. I will use my regularly used style, which is this one, and hit OK. And I'm going to change my title block settings over here. I'm going to call the project the island set view. This will be to be confirmed. Use the total number of sheets. The sheet data is empty here, empty here. Maybe I want to call this my set plan. But on my second sheet title, I will say this is a schematic, and I'll change it to today's date. These can be empty, and OK. And my logo seems to have disappeared, so I'm going to edit this. And I want to change this to a solid, and then change it back to an image. Then I want to use the attribute manager mapping tool and just scale down. My icon. This is completely unnecessary, but it gives me some satisfaction to know that it's very clear that it's my drawing. Okay, and hit exit title block layout, and I'm ready to bring in my viewports. So I'll go over to view and create viewport, and we know that under layers I want to bring in my set base layer. We also know that under classes I want to make sure everything other than the references class is turned on. And hit OK. 1 to 50 sounds about right. I'm going to call this plan view. Okay, and the plan view appears. So commonly when you do a export of a set plan, you want to give people a front elevation, a side elevation, and a 3D render. So I'm just going to option drag this guy to make 3 copies, and maybe one more. This is going to stay as my plan view. This will change perspective to a front view. This will be a left view, and this one will be a front left isometric. So you'll notice that the sizing seems very off. That's because the viewport scales according to, or the size of the viewport changes according to where the drawing label is. So I want to go in here and edit annotations, and I want to move this up a little bit more. And while I'm here, I'm going to change this to front elevation view. Sit, and that's better. Same thing over here. I'm going to edit annotations, and I'm going to change this to right side view, or right elevation view, I think. And I want to move this up here. It's a left elevation view. And quickly fix that. This is a left elevation view. Over here. And for this guy, I'm going to edit annotations, and we'll just call it a front left iso view. There we go. And considering that this is a A2 page, obviously my viewports look really small, so you can play around with that to get the right size view. So maybe a 1/25 might be a better fit. Yeah, looks about right. And 1/25. So I just want to place them neatly within my sheet layer so that everything is visible. And before I go into adding dimensions into this, I want to duplicate this first. I'm going to call this one the shaded view, or the shaded plan. And in here, I'm going to go in and edit my annotations. I'm going to call this shaded plan view. And we're going to change this to a shaded render. Same thing over here. I'm going to go in, edit annotations, shaded front elevation view, and we're going to change the background render to shaded. One more time. Annotations. This is going to be shaded left elevation view. for the isometric view over here, I'm going to edit the annotations first. Oh, wrong place to edit. And I'm going to call this shaded front left iso view. And while I'm here, maybe move this a little bit closer. For this one though, maybe go a little fancy. I do a final quality Renderworks, just because we can. Okay, and I'm going to quickly update this. Vectorworks will take a moment to cook up your render. And same thing over here. Okay, and in my title block border, I want to update my scale, and I'm going to call this sheet my shaded. Well, maybe it'd be better if we just had a number for them, just so that things don't get confusing. Okay, there we go. That's the shaded view. Going back to the first page, in here I want to add in some dimensions. So I like to do that for the plan view first. Before we get to that, maybe update my sheet settings. Okay, and we're going to go in over here and we're going to edit annotations. And using the constraint linear dimensions tool, I want to just mark out some of these dimensions. I don't think it's necessary to mark out every single dimension, because after some point it just becomes quite clear that you are going for a multiple of a certain dimension. But having some key dimensions helps people to identify what their yardstick is. Yeah. Maybe one more just for the longest measurement of the island itself. And lastly for this, I want to make sure that for my dimensions class, I use a pen style of a line type, and I want it to be blue. Make sure to check the user creation, and yes to all. That should give me a blue dash line for my dimensions. I also want to make sure that there are some dimensions on the left elevation view, because you need to know your height, and you can only do that in an elevation view. So same thing, we're gonna pick the common heights. Go. So that covers how to create a sheet or a set of sheets for your drawing. If you look at the drawing itself with the texture, okay. And if you go into the sheet layer, you can go right ahead and just hit to File, Publish, and make sure both sheets are in the publishing set. Hit Publish. No, I don't want to save this. When it's done, 2025, set to Export 1. it should pop open once it's done. And there you go. You have a schematic view and a shaded view. Good enough for a submission or for your builder to take a look at, or even for your director to take a look at to see what they're going to be working with. So that will be one example of pulling a 3D model out of a 2D drawing. It works for me particularly because I have a number of friends that design on Illustrator. Speaking of which, the designer for this particular set is a good buddy of mine, Shadik, and he is linked down in the description below. You can check out his work and maybe give him a buzz if you need some inspiration. Moving ahead, we'll try to look at a different set which has more diagonally climbing lines, if you understand what I mean. And then we need to explore adjusting one point at a time. It's a little bit more work, but your set starts to look very different when you get to that kind of a drawing. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching and Happy New Year.